Guys, hi, my name is Alex. I want to make two little announcements. So we are running Binder.js Guild's meetup group, and we are super happy to have you here. There will be one more meetup that we are planning together with Tech Leads meetup group, the group that was just created. We are planning the kickoff event next Wednesday. So if you are senior chapter leads, tech leads, whatsoever, consider coming next Wednesday to Binder. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'm really happy to see that the GraphQL community in Netherlands and Amsterdam is growing, and I think this event is a beautiful confirmation that the community is growing, and thanks to Lively for having this event. So we are really passionate about helping the community to grow and contributing to the community. And saying that, I want to maybe tell you, maybe you haven't heard about it yet, there will be GraphQL Europe conference in Berlin in 15th of June, I believe. They just released early bird tickets. I'm not sure, I believe it's like 199 euro. I talked to organizers, and one of the organizers is GraphQL, right? They said that there is no promo code so far. Most likely price will not go down. So if you are considering to convince your employer to send you to a GraphQL conference, I think this is the right moment to do it. Now we will start the show and tell, and Kim will start this part of the evening, and Kim is author and contributor of many GraphQL libraries. So he's one of the most experienced people in the GraphQL ecosystem. So we will have a little introduction, or maybe a big introduction to GraphQL ecosystem. And I'm very happy to have Kim tonight. So after Kim, please join and come stage and talk about what you've done or what you think about GraphQL.
Thank you, Alex, for your kind introduction. Yes, my name is Kim Brandwijk. GraphQL developer and enthusiast. I've been working on several tools in the GraphQL ecosystem for the past 6 months, roughly. And one of the things that we noticed when working on these tools is that there's a lot of investment going on in the client-side tools, with Apollo client and everything they're doing on the client side, React, Relay. A lot of that stuff is all happening on the client. But building a GraphQL server yourself and having a great development workflow around that, and a great development experience, there was a lot lacking in that area. So mostly driven by the initiatives from both Apollo and GraphQL. We really decided to invest in that over the past few months to really get to that, build your own GraphQL server to make that a very smooth and easy experience also for starters. So that's the reason why I want to share a little bit of that with you. First of all, who has ever built his own GraphQL server? And have you all used Apollo server for that, or other? Mostly Apollo. Other? Sangria?
I've seen. I've seen.
So, was that an easy experience overall, or? Oh. I'm going to show you. This is my current toolbox for building a GraphQL server. It contains tools ranging from CLI tools to configuration tools to tools for actually running your GraphQL server. And I'm going to get to those in more detail. But first, I'd like to show you how that's all connected. So this looks like a very complicated picture, but it really isn't. In the middle, we have our GraphQL server, and we create it using a boilerplate. I'll show that in more detail. We use bindings to existing GraphQL endpoints because 9 out of 10 times we're not just concerned with building our own GraphQL server with a database underneath it. Most organizations will have existing endpoints, whether they're GraphQL endpoints, REST APIs we've already seen earlier tonight. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that. And in the end, we're going to actually deploy and use our GraphQL server. So let's take that step by step. First step is, what's the easiest way to get started building your own GraphQL server? And one of the things we did is we came up with a number of GraphQL boilerplates, which are basically ready-made GraphQL server projects that you can easily start. Some with JavaScript, some with TypeScript. There are currently 6 down. You can see them here. Some full stack examples, some backend only. But that gives you a great starting point for setting up your own server. And the tool that we're going to use is the GraphQL CLI. And if you know the GraphQL CLI? No? Okay. The GraphQL CLI contains a lot of commands for working with GraphQL endpoints. So it contains commands to download schemas from a GraphQL server. It contains commands to set up a new server, add endpoints to an existing configuration. So it's a very versatile tool. And at that one command, GraphQL create, that basically takes that boilerplate and installs it for you. And what most of the boilerplates also contain is a Prisma, formerly known as a GraphQL service, which is basically a backend as a service platform for specifying GraphQL schema. And what it will do for you when you deploy that schema, it will actually create a database using AWS Aurora. And it will give you a full CRUD API and subscription API. So just based on a simple GraphQL schema, it'll take a lot of work out of your hands. So that's also very useful if you're getting started, you want a quick getting started experience, setting up a database and having a GraphQL endpoint for it. Okay, so taking that boilerplate and installing that, what we'll get is we'll get a configuration file from GraphQL config, and this configuration file basically determines all of your endpoints. So we have an app endpoint here with a schema. We have a backend database with a schema as well, and we have some other endpoints defined here. So this is just a quick sample configuration file. And the next thing we need to define our GraphQL server is a schema definition, of course. And I saw in the previous examples a little bit of a different notation. I'd like to use the schema definition language, the SDL notation, because I think it's a bit easier to read. And most of you will probably be familiar with the bottom half of this, defining a query, defining your types. And most of you will probably wonder about what's going on there at the top. One of the tools we developed is GraphQL import, and what that allows you to easily do is take types from an existing schema and import those into your own GraphQL server schema. So in this case, let's imagine we're connecting to, in this case, a Bahnhof endpoint, which is a German train operator. And we want to import the type station from it because we're using it in our own schema and we don't feel like redefining or copying it. We can just import it right there. And what the result of this actually is, and I had to make it very small, you can still, it's still not everything. This is the resulting schema of those simple imports. Why? Because the station has other fields and those fields have types, so it's really like a recursive import of all the types you need. So that makes defining your own schema nice and simple and very clear to use, and it will give you all the types you need to actually run your server. So that's GraphQL import, very useful tool. And what you'll also get out of most of the boilerplates is your basic, very basic implementation of a GraphQL server. For those of you familiar with Apollo server, this uses GraphQL Yoga, which is basically a layer on top of Apollo server. So underneath, this is using Apollo server, but it's providing you with a number of extras out of the box, like easy support for subscriptions, easy support for just defining your type definitions and resolvers, and have your server up and running. It will also come with a built-in playground, so similar to GraphQL. I'm going to show that one later. And it's going to come with a built-in subscription endpoint. So basically all you need is this amount of code and you have a basic server running with the schema we just defined. Okay, next I said there's a possibility that you might want to connect to an existing endpoint. Just not directly calling a database in your resolvers, but using an existing GraphQL API or the GitHub API, for example, or the Prisma service, the GraphQL API that it gives you. So all of those are possible with another invaluable tool, which is GraphQL Bindings. And what GraphQL Bindings does is basically it's your ORM tool for GraphQL. So you feed it a GraphQL schema, any GraphQL schema, and it will generate, based on the language you use. If you use TypeScript, it will generate TypeScript type definitions for you, and it will also create a class that gives you easy access to all of your queries and mutations and subscriptions that are part of the schema. Now, if we go back to the config file we used before, you're going to notice we have here a prepare binding section, and that's actually what configures those bindings. So it's going to define, I want a TypeScript file as an output, and I want to use a specific generator. There are currently generators for JavaScript and TypeScript, for regular GraphQL endpoints, and for Prisma GraphQL endpoints. And what that gives you, this is a sample of the schema we're going to feed it. Just types, mutations, and other things you're used to in schema. And what that will give you is TypeScript type definitions. So all of your schema, all of your queries, your mutations, all of the individual types, all of your argument types, they're all generated for you as TypeScript types. And what it will also give you is that class that I talked about, based on a base class, that exposes all of your queries and all of your mutations as methods on the class, so you can easily call them. So what's the benefit of that? You get full type safety, not only for the name of the query, but also for all of the arguments when using this in TypeScript. So that's very valuable, makes it really easy to talk to an existing GraphQL API and execute queries against it. So those bindings that we just looked at, it's going to be as simple as adding them to the context of our server. We've seen in the previous presentation, the context is shared across all resolvers of your server. So we're going to add those to the context, and then implementing, for example, the reviews resolver is going to be as simple as just calling our endpoint, calling a query on it, and saying we want all of the reviews in this case with certain arguments. That's all that's needed to talk to that existing GraphQL API, and all the other details are abstracted away and easy to use. It can get even more easy If you just want to directly forward a call to an existing query, in this case we're directly using the create review mutation, and all that's needed is to define forward to and specify the name of the endpoint, and that's all you need to specify to implement this resolver in your own GraphQL server and make sure it gets forwarded to the existing GraphQL endpoint. So bindings, basically the possibilities are endless. There are a few basic functionalities like this in the base classes, but it's very easy to extend. For example, there's a GraphQL binding specifically for GitHub that just asks you for your token basically and exposes the entire GitHub API like this. There's going to be a GraphQL binding open API that we're working on now, where you can feed your Swagger or open API definition to it, and it will actually generate the full GraphQL schema for it. So a lot of possibilities there that we're going to explore over the coming periods. There's one type of binding that I want to highlight, and probably, who knows this logo? None of you? Great. This is the logo of Gramps. Gramps is a tool that's recently developed by IBM. They wanted a way to, within their organization, within large teams, they wanted a uniform way to share data sources. So what they made Gramps, and what that does is it takes any data source and packages it as a GraphQL schema, as an NPM package. So if you need any data source, you just install the package, add the binding that's exported from it to your server, and that's it. And so you really don't need to be concerned with the details, the implementation details of that data source. It could be a REST API, it could be a database, it could be anything basically. You don't need to be concerned with it. You just install the package and use the standard format they defined for the export, and you're ready to go. So that's especially within organizations where you have different teams in charge of their own endpoints within the organization. It's a very valuable tool to share those. I'm going to skip the deploy part, but I do want to show you this. This is the GraphQL playground, better described as GraphQL on steroids. For everyone using GraphQL now, I would strongly advise you to have a look at the GraphQL playground. The basic functionality is the same, but it offers a few nice extras. First of all, it's compatible with GraphQL config. So if you have that configuration file that we showed in the beginning, where you have a number of endpoints or a number of different GraphQL APIs in your project, what that gives you is easy access to those from a single playground. So, for example, this is the gateway endpoint, so that's your public GraphQL server that you're building, but it's very easy during development to switch to one of the underlying endpoints and just query it directly. So it's very easy to do testing on it. So that works very well. Another useful feature is support for tracing. Tracing was introduced by Apollo in their GraphQL tools. They have something called Apollo Engine, which does both caching and tracing, and gives you historical tracing information and all kinds of useful things. But it's a semi-free service, basically. After the first 1 million requests, we start paying for it. So we decided to put at least minimal tracing support in the playground. So what you can see here, based on the query you've run, is for each level how long it actually took to retrieve. So it's very easy. If we would use this playground for the previous example with the SQL query optimization, it would be very easy to see the differences in tracing information between running multiple requests and running one combined request. So that's very helpful. Also, it's available as both as an Electron desktop app and a browser version, and it's also available as middleware for Express, Goa, API, Lambda, so you can easily integrate it in your own server. And it's also available as a React package if you wanted to integrate it in your own app. So that's another very useful tool. Now, I promised I would keep this in 10 minutes, so I'm going to quickly go back to this overview and then leave you with a set of links. Whenever this is published, then you can have a look at all of these individual packages in more detail. If you want to find me, you can find me on GitHub with my tag, or you can find me on either the Apollo or GraphQL Slack channel if you want to discuss anything related to this. So, any questions?
Last first. Are there any plans to make the playground mobile compatible? At the moment, it's very unhandy to use it on a phone, but we actually like it much better than the GraphQL API, but that's the only problem, that on mobile it's almost sometimes impossible to type the queries.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's already one of the known issues. I know there's been a lot of feedback on the GraphQL playground, and there's continuous work going on to improve on that. So I would suggest you to look it up on GitHub and see if that's already one of the reported issues. And if not, please report it, because then it will definitely be attended to sooner or later. Any other questions? Okay, then that's it for me.